Alright, so today we're going to work on this review exercise where we're going to take this list of cell parts that's down here at the bottom, which are all the cell parts that we've learned so far, and we're going to put them into these different categories. So we have some choices. We have prokaryotes or bacterial cells only, so that means it's only found here and not found other places. Eukaryotes only. Now we have two kinds of cells that we would call eukaryotes. So basically anything with a nucleus and organelles. Okay, so we would find that basically eukaryotes only is another way of saying we would find it in plant and animal cells. In plant cells only, that's pretty specific. It means we'd find it only in the cells of plants. In animal cells, only in the cells of animals. And then in all cells, which means every single cell, even if it's a bacterial cell or a prokaryotic cell, if it's a eukaryotic cell, all cells have to have that part. So the first thing I want you to do is to grab a pencil and pause this video. And I want you to try and do it by yourself and then use this video to check your work. Make sure that you either do it in pencil or you print off 2 copies of this diagram, one for before you watch the video and one for after. I don't mind which way you do it, but I would like you to be able to change it so that you have all the correct answers when it comes time to be done with it. All right, so pause it and I will join you back in a minute. Okay, so hopefully now you have your diagram filled in. I'm going to walk through and we're going to go through each of the parts. So the cell membrane. The first question you should ask yourself is, could a cell exist without a cell membrane? The answer is no. All cells have to have a cell membrane. So in order to have a cell, in order to exist, you have to have a cell membrane. So all cells have a cell membrane. So go ahead and check that you put that one in the right spot. If not, go ahead and change it and then mark it off. Next we have, and I'm going to go down each row, the cytoplasm. So first of all, what is cytoplasm? Well, hopefully it's it's a mostly water substance, right? That is a solution where things like sugars and salts and minerals can be dissolved for your cells to use, okay? All cells have to have cytoplasm. All right, what about the mitochondrion? Well, first of all, you should review with yourself, what does the mitochondrion do? Well, we know that it converts glucose into ATP. Well, that sounds like a useful thing for all cells to do, right? And that's true, but it also has its own membrane, meaning it's an organelle or a membrane-bound organelle. So because it's a membrane-bound organelle, that means that eukaryotic cells only have it. Bacterial cells cannot have it. Next, we're going to go to the cell wall. Now, a cell wall is a tricky one because we learned about it in 2 different places. So first, we learned about it with bacterial cells. So we want to put it in prokaryotes only. And I'm going to tell you why we're doing it this way in just a second. So we're putting it in prokaryotes only. But if you have been paying attention, you're going, wait, Mrs. Carvalho, that's wrong, right? You're not doing it correctly because I remember you said plant cells also have a cell wall. And that's true. But they're made out of different things. So we're going to list them separately. So prokaryotes, and you don't need to remember these names, but prokaryotes have a cell wall that's made out of something called peptidoglycan. Plants have a cell wall that's made out of something called cellulose. So they're actually different kinds of cell walls. You don't need to remember that for now. All I want you to remember is that they're found in both prokaryotes or bacteria, and they're found in plant cells. The only type of cell we learned about that doesn't have a cell wall are animal cells, okay? What about chromosomes? Well, what do chromosomes do should be your first question to yourself, and hopefully you were able to find that chromosomes contain the instructions for what a cell should make. So they contain DNA, which we talked about is like the blueprint for what a cell does. A cell would be very good to function without a blueprint. So we find all cells have chromosomes. Some cells, like bacterial cells, only have 1 chromosome, whereas humans, we have 46 chromosomes in most of our cells, okay? What about the chloroplast? Well, what's the function of a chloroplast? It's to do photosynthesis, right? So can humans do photosynthesis? Can animals do photosynthesis? No. Plants do photosynthesis. So the chloroplast is found in plant cells only. Now, it is found in some things that aren't considered plants. If you remember learning about protists earlier in the year, or fungi, they both can have, in certain circumstances, they can have chloroplasts, but those are kind of exceptions to the rules, and we're not talking about those particular types of cells here today. So for our purposes, they're going to be found in plant cells only. Ribosomes. What do the ribosomes do? They are workers, right? So the way we talked about them is if the cell were a factory, the ribosomes would be the workers that built everything. So the ribosomes are going to be reading the chromosome. They're going to be looking at that DNA, taking those instructions from that blueprint and actually turning it into protein. So most of the things in your cells come from proteins, right? You have structural things that come from proteins. You have molecules that allow chemical reactions to happen that come from proteins. You have little signals that get sent all over your body. Those come from proteins. So every cell, including bacterial cells, need to be able to make proteins. So because they need to be able to make proteins, we all need to have ribosomes. So animals, plants, and bacterial cells, or all cells, are going to have ribosomes. Next, we come to the pili, right? And if you remember the pili had a very specific function in that they help bacteria, so specifically bacteria, stick to surfaces. And what that does is it helps the bacteria to actually infect things like other animals. And so in infecting animals, the pili really help the bacteria to stick to surfaces. It makes them more infectious. Pili are only found in prokaryotes. The vacuole. Now the vacuole can be kind of confusing. The vacuole, what we mean by vacuole here, is a large vacuole that holds water and waste products. That large vacuole is only found in plant cells. It's what helps a plant stand upright by creating something called turgor pressure. Basically, the vacuole fills with water and it pushes out on the cell wall, and that's going to cause plants to stand upright. It's also what makes a vegetable crispy when you bite into it, which is why if you keep a veggie around just a little bit too long, it's not bad, but it maybe is a little bit soft. And so if you notice, like, tomatoes get soft, lettuce can get wilty. The reason that's happening is because some of the water is leaving the vacuole and it's not pushing as hard on the cell wall anymore, so it becomes less rigid, okay? So vacuoles, at least in this sense, the large sense, are only found in plant cells. Sometimes there are smaller things that we would call maybe food vacuoles that can be found in other eukaryotes, but we're not focusing on those right now. The nucleus. So what does the nucleus do? Well, oftentimes you talk about it as the control center for the cell. The only reason it's really the control center is because it contains the chromosome, right? So that might sound really like it's important for all cells, but because it has a membrane that's not attached to the cell, it is considered an organelle. And so we know that the nucleus and membrane-bound organelles can only be in eukaryotes. So we're going to find the nucleus in both plant and animal cells. We'll call it eukaryotes only. Next, we come to the flagellum. The flagellum is a long whip-like kind of tail that can be used like a motor to either push a cell or pull a cell. Now, the flagellum can occasionally be found in certain eukaryotic cells, but that's more of the exception than the rule. The rule is that only bacterial cells have flagellum. So the flagellum will go in the prokaryotes only column. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum, I'm going to abbreviate that SER. If you spelled it out, that is just great, but if you want to abbreviate it for now, since it's already written on the bottom of this chart, you can go ahead and do that. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is found in both types of eukaryotic cells, so plant and animal cells. It is not found in bacterial cells because it contains its own membrane, which makes it an organelle, which means it can't be in prokaryotes. The nucleolus is found in any type of cell that has a nucleus. That's not one of the organelles that I hold you specifically responsible for, but I included it here because it was on the drawings of the cells that we did, and since it was on those drawings, I didn't want to leave you wondering where it would go, and so it goes in eukaryotes only. Any cell that has a nucleus will also have a nucleolus. All right, next we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Anything that has a smooth endoplasmic reticulum should also have a rough endoplasmic reticulum. So both types of endoplasmic reticulums are going to be found in eukaryotes only. That's because they're true organelles, meaning they have their own membranes, so they can't be found in prokaryotic cells. Lastly, we have the Golgi apparatus. If you ask yourself, what does the Golgi apparatus do, right? Well, if you remember, it makes those packages called vesicles, and then it marks them with chemical tags to ship things outside of the cell. It's kind of like the mail room, if we were comparing it to our factory analogy. It's where the packages would go to be sent out of the factory. They get an address label, they get put on a truck or whatever, and they get sent out, okay? The same thing happens in your cell. Whatever molecule is made gets packaged into a vesicle package, it gets a chemical tag that says where it should go, and then it gets shipped out of the cell. So what kind of cell has a Golgi apparatus? Well, a Golgi apparatus has a membrane, so it can only, let's try again. So it can only be found in eukaryotes because they have true organelles and they can have structures with membranes and a nucleus. So it's found in eukaryotes only or in both plant and animal cells. So remember, a way of saying eukaryotes only here for us is also a way of saying it's found in plants and animals. So if you want to just write that reminder down, you can do that as well. All right, that's all the parts of the cell. I hope that this review and kind of organizer was helpful to you. Have a good day.